any kind of security is a cat and mouse game, right? We're always trying to keep up with each other. The mice are always trying to find a new way to get the cheese. The cats are always trying to find a new way to prevent the mice. And so it's always evolving. And I would say if you think about if you think about our world of data security, and I say our world, I mean all the ways people can access data. Well, people can access data through a direct connection to a database. They can connect to a file server in the cloud or on-prem.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to another episode of The Future of Data Security. Today I'm speaking with Terry Ray, SVP Data Security at Imperva. Terry, thanks for chatting with me today.
Thanks for having me on, John.
First and foremost, how did you get started in data security and privacy?
It was, I've got gray hair, right? So it was not yesterday that I began this journey. I started years ago. Cisco was my first foray into everything that we do. And then ultimately Checkpoint Software needed somebody who spoke SQL. As you can imagine, at the perimeter, if something's wrong with your firewall or if something's wrong with your network, it's always the firewall's fault. And they needed somebody who could understand routing and prove that it might not be the firewall's fault. So I went to Checkpoint. One of the key founders of Checkpoint Software was a man named Shlomo Kramer. And Shlomo was the founder of Imperva. And so he said, hey, look, he's like, we're starting this new company. You should come over and be a part of it. And 21 years later, I'm still at Imperva. Shlomo's gone on to do Cato Networks and other things, but I've been doing application and data security now at Imperva for about 21 years.
And Imperva recently joined the Thales group, as I understand.
That's right. Yeah. So Thales just brought Imperva into the portfolio. We had been private equity for about 4 years, part of Thoma Bravo, which has a big cadre or big list of cybersecurity companies, but they ultimately brought us over to Thales. And Thales is really a perfect fit for us. Maybe we'll get into that later or not, but it's really a really perfect fit, I think, where there was very little, almost zero overlap in technology, but a huge overlap in the value, if you will, that a combined technology group can bring.
Fantastic. And since you have all the gray hairs, you've seen all the movies, how would you say the data security landscape evolved since you started, and particularly with the rise of cloud, API security more recently? What are your thoughts?
Any kind of security is a cat and mouse game, right? We're always trying to keep up with each other. The mice are always trying to find a new way to get the cheese. The cats are always trying to find a new way to prevent the mice. And so it's always evolving. And I would say if you think about if you think about our world of data security, and I say our world, I mean all the ways people can access data. Well, people can access data through a direct connection to a database. To your point, they can connect to a file server in the cloud or on-prem. When I started in 2003 in data security, cloud existed a little bit, but not nearly to what we see today. And so the first big transition was that lift and shift, right? Moving from on-prem, moving into the cloud, moving my business to the cloud. Ultimately, some cases running my entire business in the cloud. But I think the biggest difference that I see in organizations from a data perspective, both from the database as well as from file servers, is who is responsible for the actual security of those assets. Meaning, rewind a decade ago, the people that were responsible for protecting a database were DBAs. Security would say, what do I know about protecting a database? I know nothing about databases, and neither does anybody on my staff. It's the DBA's job. The DBAs would say, my job is to make a database work. My job is to make it fundamentally fast and do what the business needs. Security is not my job. And so we saw lots of breaches back in the early 2000s. We still see some today as well. People haven't gotten it right. Same thing in file servers. It was the IT information technologies team's job to do information security on file servers. When now a decade later, it's not. It's cybersecurity's team to maintain security on file servers, whether they're in the cloud or on-prem. And so I think there's still a transition that tends to be going on in the file side, which I think is a little bit slower to change than on the database side. And the database side, there was a massive change about almost a decade ago when GDPR came out and privacy entered the realm of data security, and said, we really need to do something about this. And now you had somebody whose head was on the block, the chief data officers whose head was on the block, saying somebody needs to own this. It looks like nobody owns this in the data world, so security took it. I think that is still a transition that's happening in the file space a bit. Who's responsible? Who can prevent malware? Who can prevent ransomware? And all of these pieces. But majority today, I'm saying that big change has been a shift in ownership from, I would argue, not really an owner of cybersecurity. Nobody really wanted to pick up that baton and say it's me, to finally cybersecurity saying, all right, I have network, I have endpoint, and clearly I have data security too. I need more budget, I need more team, I need something, but let me make this happen, because clearly my phone's the one that's going to ring when we have a breach.
It's so interesting. So, in other words, what you're saying is the file security, the data security was sort of attached to the data source or the medium of interest, but now finally things have graduated to, okay, you know what, let's showcase that as a part of the whole cybersecurity enterprise.
Yeah, and I think you can see the vendor market kind of transitioning to meet that, right? You look at the whiz out there, the whizzes of the world, the cloud posture management. All of a sudden, in the last few years, posture management's become this thing. And posture management, whether it's data posture management or cloud posture management, everybody all of a sudden wants a number. They want a score to ask, how good am I doing? Am I doing well? Am I doing the right things? Am I doing the wrong things? What could I be doing better? And arguably, I would say we were probably all asking those same questions 2 decades ago and a decade ago. There just wasn't a way to really get an answer. And I will say, I've heard people in the past, customers of other vendors, ask, I've got this product, I've had it for 10 years. And to be fair, I don't understand the value that I'm getting out of the product. I mean, think about an anti-malware product. Okay, it's blocking stuff, it's blocking things. So maybe I haven't had a breach in a long time. If I've never had a breach before and I still haven't had a breach, is it really providing me any value? And I think the same thing is kind of true. If I was passing a PCI audit before a technology and passing a PCI audit with a technology, where's the value? And I think people are pretty short-minded as well when they come into it and they say, okay, I failed my PCI audit. Now I pass a PCI audit. Now, Janet Jackson, what have you done for me lately? Right. So now PCI is not an issue anymore, but I'm still paying for your product. And so I think this is one of these things where people see the technology now rising up and saying, okay, I own this. I own data security. I own file security. Probably when there's an audit or a regulator that comes in, my phone's going to ring too, and they're going to want to report on who did what, when, where, or should they have done it, who accessed data. They have all these reports they want to get. And yet there's still gaps. They still have problems. There's still breaches. There's still exposures. There's still all of these things. And so the board and the C-suite, they're all asking, it just happened to company XYZ down the street. What are we doing to make sure we're not going to be like them? Well, we bought all the technology. We've deployed it all. But to be fair, the skills haven't totally caught up with the technology. People can deploy things, but then they're in the back of their mind, I still believe, and I'm confident of this, they're not certain they've done everything they need to do, even with the technology that they have. And that's why you see the industry rising up and saying, okay, let us tell you what you need to do next. Let us tell you what you need to do more. LinkedIn got this a long time ago. When you go to LinkedIn, it says your profile is 80% done. There's 20% more things you need to go do. Security technologies have to do the same thing. Tell you what is that other 20% that I haven't done that's going to make me better than I am today.
That makes so much sense. And I'm going to steal your line from Whitney Houston. What have you done for me lately?
Right?
A very interesting area right now is generative AI. And obviously, it seems like this technology has progressed so fast, so quick, in many respects, far ahead of the data security that's required to use it securely. Do you have any special thoughts on that topic specifically?
Look, AI is just another user of your data. If you take it to its most simple form, AI is just another user of your data. And I don't mean the data that you have on the web where they're, learning from the web and generative AI and doing all this. I'm talking about the AI that your organization has said, I want a chatbot. I want somebody who's going to replace my customer service organization or my frontline customer service organization. So the first experience people have is not necessarily talking to a human, but they shouldn't be able to tell the difference. When Terry logs into his cellular communications company and he asks about his account and his bill and what his last bill was and all of this, Terry shouldn't have to talk to a human for that. Really, Terry should be able to just look at his bill. But if you need AI Terry to help you do it, my AI will connect to your private data, your account information. It will tell you how much you pay, why you pay it, your minutes, or whatever is important on your account, even your address and all the other things. So at the end of the day, all that AI is doing, and yeah, there's 1,000 different kinds, but all that AI is doing is acting and replacing what an application, an API or an application would have done previously with a human sitting behind a keyboard and doing the exact same thing. AI is now doing exactly that for you. It reduces cost and does all of that. However, organizations have to realize they have to train that AI. So, what data are they training the AI on? And they have to put guardrails around the AI to make sure that, look, it's an application. I don't remember the last flawless application that was ever written or the last application that was ever written that didn't have third party code that hadn't been patched or didn't have exploits or didn't have problems in it. AI is just an application. That's all it is. And while I've talked a lot about data security, the reality is the other half of my 21 years at Imperva was application security. In fact, most people know Imperva as a web application firewall more so than they do database security or data security. So when we think about protecting an application, that's what AI is. And it's about being able to monitor and have controls around from end to end, from the application, from the user to the application to the API, which may well be an AI, and then knowing what that AI is doing within your data. It's not that you have to build a policy manually and say this is what the AI can do, but technology has risen today to the point where you can watch AI or any other user over a period of time and you can model them and you can say, this is what that AI is 99.9999% of the time. This is what this AI is going to touch, the type of data, how much volume of data. I get the picture of that AI. If it starts doing things it's not supposed to because somebody exploited the application, the API, or somebody used the API's credential. Let's face it, it's connecting to a database and a file server. It has a credential on the database and the file server. If somebody exploits and gets the username and password of the AI and there aren't controls in place to restrict IP address or server name or host name or any of the other things, then someone can go in and have the same full access that AI can. So really, at the end of the day, while there are exploits that can happen on AI throughout AI's maturity, through model selection, through education and learning, and then ultimately into implementation, the reality is from a day-to-day perspective, organizations have to treat AI as they would a privileged user on their system, monitor them. They need to still encrypt the exact same data they would have been encrypting before, and they need to have guardrails on it so they know it's allowed to access these assets, these resources in the ways it's supposed to, and keep it inside its guardrails, and it'll be fine. But I think it's this learning curve that's a hard one because honestly, take AI out of the equation. Most organizations today, even though the technology exists, still actually don't do a great job at doing data security. They still lose data. They still fail in terms of doing data security. So AI is just another complexity to add onto this stack of things that organizations still haven't caught up with bad actors on yet.
Wow, what a great answer. And you touch on so many points that I fundamentally agree on. Maybe switching gears a little bit and going back to your career, can you share a defining moment or project or an engagement throughout your career that really shaped your approach or your mindset today in cybersecurity?
I think I'm going to call it a light bulb moment, right? A moment where you're trugging along and you're doing what you're doing what you think you're supposed to. I was in sales at the time, by the way. I was an engineer, but I was in sales, and I would talk to customers all of the time. We talked to them all of the time about solving problems, eliminating their challenges and solving their problems. And I went to this one particular credit card company, clearly will be remain unnamed, but one particular credit card company, big company, as you would imagine. And they said, look, we need to protect our applications. They need to be protected. And we said, okay, well, the right way to protect applications is to protect them all. If you have one hole in an application, you have a hole in the path to all your most critical data. Why would you only protect a little bit? And their answer back was, they said, look, what we've been doing with your technology here over the last several weeks or whatever it is has been great. It's worked wonderfully. They said, and they were very candid with me. They said, look, the reality is for us to get any more budget, these are our most critical servers. There's nothing more critical than these servers, which is how we got budget to secure these servers. We know in best practice, we would secure all of the rest of the servers too, but they're not as important. These are servers that house customer data, PCI data, financial service data, all of this. And while that might exist in other systems, these are just more critical. The only way that we're going to get any more money to do anything beyond these servers is we have to have a breach. When we're breached, the pocketbooks open up, the clouds open, the lights come down, the executive staff says, what do you need? Anything you need, you can have it. Probably for about 30 days, you can have whatever you want. After the 30 days, they're going to remember that there's a budget and we're not going to go with it, but they want you to solve this problem. And that problem might be covering everything. But until we have that problem, Terry, this is the best we're going to do. Okay, fine. Now, to be fair, it took about 4 years and we did get over that hump and it didn't require a breach to get there. But the reality is that I took to heart from that was that I think a lot of cybersecurity teams know what they need to do. They know what best practice is. They know that from a data protection perspective, and while I was talking about application security, this applies in data just as well, and I've applied it in data just as well. Cybersecurity teams know that they are tasked with securing data. But at the same time, they know, for the most part, the only budget they're going to get from executive staff is regulatory compliance. You're guaranteed to fail an audit once a year, twice a year. You're going to be audited. There's no question. You will be audited if you're in a regulated system. You will be audited. You will fail, and there will be fines or there will be consequences. So you will get budget for that. You very likely will not get budget for boiling the ocean on cybersecurity, even though a CISO might want to. The reality is unfortunately, sometimes either you have a forward-looking executive staff, you have a very persuasive CISO who's really able to tell the story. Maybe on a good day, you've got a peer or even a competitor who just got hacked, and now you can point to that, and you didn't need to get hacked, but they did, and now the pocketbooks open up. Or you have to get hacked. That's the unfortunate thing that I took to heart. And it's the conversation that we've had to have year after year after year with customers. And I think that that's one of the catalysts for organizations, vendor organizations now today, saying there has to be a way that experts can more convincingly educate executives and boards that you may pass a regulation. That may be great for you. However, it's really important to be able to put a number and a metric and a threat against all the other things that you haven't done in front of the executives so that they sign off on it and say, we accept that risk. We understand that all of these assets that we have no controls on have a astronomically high risk, and we accept that we're not giving you budget for it. Check. And I don't think that that's really been done in black and white as frequently as it has over the last couple of years, as I think new technology has come to space around all of these postures.
I'm curious, since you've been in this market for a long time, how many times you've seen that movie of a certain investment was made, then a major incident happened, and then this unlocked a lot more investment, and perhaps it would have been in retrospect better to just do these investments up front. How many times have you seen that type of a scenario?
That's a daily. I mean, there aren't daily occurrences that way, but that is the daily conversation we have, and it goes back to the Ford Motor Company. There was this very public incident around the Ford Pinto many years ago, where if you hit them in the back, they would blow up or they would catch on fire. That's where their fuel tank was. Ford just decided, honestly, it was cheaper to handle the litigation than it was to fix the car. It would have been cheaper to build the car right in the first place, but trying to fix the car after the fact, the legal fines were just frankly cheaper for them. That's not the world we live in today. And I think that's what organizations are figuring out. It's no longer, the fact that you have a breach and you're just going to get fined. You're likely going to get sued. The federal trade, at least in the United States, you're likely going to have the Federal Trade Commission, which is going to come in, which doesn't have a lot of really strict, rigid rules. They just look for negligence, and they can define negligence in an awful lot of ways. And I would argue a lot of times they find negligence in asking really simple questions. And the questions are, do you know who took the data? Do you know how they took the data? Can you tell me exactly what they took, which is probably the hardest question to answer, even though it should be the easiest question. Do you know what they took? There used to be a website called datalossdb.org. It doesn't exist anymore. It was a wonderful website. I used it all the time because they did statistics on all public breaches. They were public breaches, so you could do what you want to with it. Somebody bought them, but it was great because what you would go and see is you would see all of these breaches, and you would see the numbers of records that were stolen in the breaches. Like 90% of those numbers were big round numbers. 90 million records, 1 million records, 10 million records. I guarantee you it was not exactly 1 million records, 10 million records, 90 million. Because you would also see the ones in there that said it was 527 records. It was 1,121 records. Some people knew exactly what was taken. Some people just didn't know. And so they negotiated with the FTC or somebody else and said, I don't know what it was. And by the way, when someone asks you, if you don't know how many records were taken, the next question is the same thing a used car salesman is going to ask you. I don't know how much money you have. Let me just ask you, how much money do you have in your pocket? That's how much money this car is going to be. FTC or whomever, they're going to ask, how many records do you actually have? You're going to say, I have 100 million. Great. Let's negotiate. Let's say you lost half of them, 50 million records. Now you need to go send a message, send a stamp. Stamps are 50 cents or 75 cents today. Back in the day, they were 50 cents. So great. So 50 million records, 50 million people, $25 million in stamps later, it gets really expensive, really fast for an organization. It's the world we live in every single day that we have to deal with. And I think my effort right now, my biggest effort right now is educating auditors. I've stopped trying to educate security. Security knows they just can't get budget. So I've now shifted, and now I go to the IIA, the International Internal Auditors Association. I go to ISACA. I go to the people who are telling the people who are responsible what they need to do. So now I spend my time with auditors as much as I can to say, you should be asking better questions. You should demand better answers. And you should demand better answers of your executives and leadership as well to put them on the hot seat. And I don't know how successful I've been, but that's just a part of what I try to do now.
We both agree that files, in particular, unstructured data, are sort of that last frontier or the long tail of risk that remains in many organizations, because it's easy to attend to databases and other systems like that. What do you see as the biggest challenges today for security leaders that are looking at files and protecting files within large organizations?
You're not getting fewer files, you're getting more files every single day. So your problem is growing every single day. It's kind of like that ticker in New York City, the national debt, it just gets bigger every single day. That could just as easily be your file server. You're getting more and more and more of them. What are you doing about it? Right. And I think there definitely are organizations that prioritize unstructured data. No question. If I go to a healthcare organization, one of the first things they prioritize is ransomware and file servers. They have to protect it. They don't always do a great job, but they know that it's on their priority list of things they need to do. And I think, when we think about ultimately protecting files, it is one of those things, right? It's one of those things that organizations have to realize you have to keep up with it. There's so many different ways to get files. In fact, to your point, usually there are only a few ways to actually get to a database. Your biggest threats on a database, arguably, are the people who have the keys to the kingdom, your privileged users, and your applications who are fully authorized as well, and whether or not they are compromised in one way or the other. Compromised users. File servers, everybody in the organization has access to your file server. Everyone. Now, maybe not every file server, but they all have access to the data. And if somebody takes data from a database, they're almost naturally going to put it into a file anyway in some form or fashion and put it somewhere. So this is one of those things where organizations really have to have a grasp. And I think one of the challenges that people have had in file security over the years is recognizing that they had to pick and choose. You either did file security first or you did database security first. Everybody has databases, everybody has file servers, some of them in, multi-cloud, hybrid, whatever it is. Ultimately, they have to ask the exact same question on both of those assets. Who did it? When? Who? What? When? Where? How? And should. Those are it's my tagline, if you will. But they have to ask all of those questions in both areas, and forever they've had to ask that across multiple products. There's not been one product that covers the entire gambit of your entire data estate, from structured, semi-structured, to unstructured, bring it all together in one nice big picture and answer the most rudimentary, simple question: what did Terry do? I don't want to go to 3 places. I just want to know what Terry did. That's all I want to know. And I want to know what he did a year ago, 2 years ago, or whatever. If they can do that, they're going to get better. But that's where they are today, I think, is it's a siloed strategy that they have to go with. And, technology is going to catch up. I promise you, technology is going to catch up. But the reality is that's the way it's been for a long time. And so you'll find organizations that are really strong in file and weak in database, and you'll find the opposite as well.
It's really funny. There's, of course, companies out there that are trying to be the Bowflex of data security. They do everything, but if you want to do bicep, there's nothing like a bicep curl.
The right job.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe if you were to speak to a younger Terry or someone that's new starting in the space, what seminal advice would you have to share?
If I had to model the success that I've had in my career and the success I've seen in other people's careers, I would primarily be talking to somebody who is technically minded. If this is someone who has a technical mindset, I actually think a great way to begin your career is to think about making certain that you can communicate. I don't know if you heard me. I don't think I've said any ums, but making certain that you can communicate and you can communicate well. It's a practice. It's something you can practice. You should practice on your own, trying to remember or teach yourself something you're amazing at. Say it in the mirror and teach yourself everything that you're amazing at. When you go into a business, you should be able to do the exact same thing. From my perspective, I've been very successful beginning my career in sales, because in sales engineering, because it gave me that requirement that I had to sit in front of somebody I don't know and tell them about something I do know. I'm really good at what I know, and let me tell you about it. And I would listen to myself as I'm talking about it, making certain that I'm getting better at telling a story. And that's what really, I think, really strong technical people can do, is they can tell a story and they can distill something that is complex down to something that anybody can understand. And if you can do that, be able to communicate, understand your technology, and distill your technology down into something that everybody will understand, you're going to have a very good career.
If you were to condense some of your thoughts into the top 3 areas that organizations should be focusing their efforts on, what would these be?
Data security is look, I do data security. Obviously, I'm biased, but at the end of the day, the only thing I see organizations lose is data. In the past, I'm sure there's still bank robberies that happen, but I haven't heard of an actual bank robbery in the news in a long time. I see it. I've seen Ocean's 11 and 12 and all the other numbers and all of that, but you just don't see them anymore. I mean, there aren't these big giant bank robberies anymore. Nobody's trying to rob Fort Knox anymore. They're only trying to steal one thing that is highly monetizable: your data. I would say the one important thing that organizations have to recognize and have to invest in is recognizing that data security is not just about authorization and perimeter. Almost every data breach is an authorized user. Every data loss is an authorized user. You have to understand your data. The second thing is recognizing that there's more than one person who has access to your data. Just your privileged users, just your DBAs, that's not enough information for an organization to be able to make decisions on what is bad behavior and what is good behavior. If I'm just looking at one subset of people, I can't compare them to other people. This is why even when we look at AI, we look at machine learning, they need to be able to compare and contrast what they're seeing now against like individuals or like things or other pictures. This is kind of like that Silicon Valley episode where they had the hot dog. Is it a hot dog or not? It only identified hot dogs. It couldn't find anything else because they only looked at hot dogs. That's what organizations are doing. I mean, I'm so narrowly focused. I can actually only do one thing, which at the end of the day is no benefit. You have to have a broad view. And thirdly, I would say is ultimately you have to decide to invest in more than compliance. You have to invest in security. And I see so few organizations actually investing in data security. Instead, they actually find out, unfortunately, after the fact of a breach, their investment was in regulatory compliance, not cybersecurity. I'll leave you with a story. So there, I'm not going to say the name of the company, but just to give you a sense of what I mean by data security, obviously you want to protect your credit cards. In other countries other than America, you need to protect names, addresses, phone numbers, and all your private information. For the most part in America, whatever you want to do. But in this one country, they had a breach. And in this breach, they had someone who went, it was a DBA. They had a DBA that went into the system. And what they were doing is they were changing the prison sentence of prisoners in jail. And they were getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to reduce a sentence. How do you detect that? That's not sensitive data. It's literally an integer, and it doesn't need to be any bigger than 100. Nobody's going to be in prison more than 100 years. So it's a very small number, 2 to 3, 1, 2, or 3 digits long. That's it. And you have to be able to see it. It's not something that you would natively recognize as important. But if you started to recognize that people are accessing it differently than, say, applications are accessing it, you would have identified it. But not if you were so narrowly focused that you only looked at DBAs, who were the only people that ever modified it. The app was the only one that was supposed to change it. DBAs are supposed to manage it. And so my point here is this: organizations have to have a much bigger recognition of where their threats really are and really start to take action there. And some do, some don't.
Unfortunately, that's all we're going to have time to cover today. But before we wrap, if people want to follow along with your work, your career, what's the best place for them to go?
You can certainly find me personally on LinkedIn, Terry Ray at LinkedIn. Feel free and find me. Imperva is be the long-term thing there. If you want to know more about the things that kind of we've talked about, I haven't talked about product today at all, just about use. But there are lots of technologies out there that do solve a lot of the problems we've talked about today. Imperva has some of them. Talus, the company that bought us, has some of them, and there are others out there. My feedback is, if you're not doing anything, go do something. If you are doing something, you probably need to do more. It's time to look and see where your risks really are.
Great. Well, this has been really fun, and I resonated with a lot of points you've made. It's been a really fun conversation. So thank you again for joining, and let's keep in touch.
All right. Thanks, John. Thanks for having me on.